We're not polluting everything. We're not on everything.
Are you paying taxes? Are you paying taxes?
It has ignited tempers on the steps of the state capitol and led to violent confrontation on northern Wisconsin lakes. But the political and legal waters surrounding Minnesota's spearfishing remain as murky as ever. The lawsuit between the Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa and the state over treaty rights has been on hold, but today the tribe says they're moving forward with their case.
In the court case, what the band will be seeking is the full extent of exercise of hunting, fishing, gathering rights, which we feel we have under the Treaty of 1837.
That's much different from the proposed settlement with the state announced in January. That gave the band land and money in exchange for a promise not to develop commercial fisheries and limiting spearing and netting in the treaty area. DNR officials believe it's a better choice than going to court.
If we lose, the losses are a lot higher. When you look at 50% of the state's resources could be at risk. We could be talking about a commercial fishing operation by the Mille Lacs Band. It's entirely conceivable, taking up to 250,000 pounds of walleye out of Lake Mille Lacs.
The legislative vote count on the agreement is said to be very close in the Senate, but its sponsor says he'll bring it to the floor for a vote, perhaps in the next week. Opponents say they still believe they can win in court.
We've watched Wisconsin. They made a lot of mistakes. They went to the landings and got suckered into making it a race issue. It's a natural resource issue.
My last name's not Custer.
Were it a boxing card, no one would have walked away feeling cheated.
Why should I pay for it? You tell me why I should pay for it.
That's why there's so many trophy fish all
I don't have a trophy fish on my wall.
The battle over Indian fishing rights will be decided inside the Capitol. But today, the opening volleys were fired on its front stoop.
You gotta have a constitutional amendment. Are you paying taxes? Religion? Do you pay taxes?
The rally was the work of fish and game groups intent on overturning a settlement between the DNR and the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwa Indians.
Everybody's got equal rights.
It soon turned from demonstration to confrontation when Native Americans made their presence and position known loud and clear.
The environment, look around you. We don't have no nuclear. We don't have no nuclear power plant. We're not polluting everything. We're not shitting on everything.
I'm not fighting with you. I just want equal rights with you.
Well, there's no such thing as equal rights in this country.
I don't want your ancestors sold your land.
The finger pointing was so fierce, sportsman spokesman Bud Grant spoke and then quickly left, saying he'd received death threats.
Late yesterday afternoon, I received a phone call that stated that if I showed up here today, I could get shot. And then they hung up.
The settlement bars commercial fishing, but otherwise grants Indians free rein to net and spearfish on 6,000 acres of Lake Mille Lacs, a right, they say, guaranteed by an 1837 treaty. Fishermen fear it will deplete the state's prime walleye waters and hurt tourism.
Lake beautiful. We don't want nobody spearing on the lake, nobody gill netting. It's everybody's lake. We all want to use it, my kids and their kids. We want to preserve Mille Lacs Lake.
But how to do it? The legislature will attempt to settle it this session. The loser is likely to take their case to court.
You're not giving us any rights. You're not giving us anything. All we're doing is claiming what is ours, and that's what we're going to do. Okay?
Dave Wildermuth, KARE 11 News, St. Paul.
Our elected leaders have not discussed this issue.
The demonstration at the Minnesota State Capitol is a vivid memory. The demonstration last April that degenerated into a shouting match.
How many treaties been broken? Can you tell me that?
And visions of Wisconsin's troubles are all too real. Troubles that increase law enforcement costs by $10 million a year. Troubles that could spill over into Minnesota.
If we go and litigate, the state and the Mille Lacs Band are going to be opposed and fighting it out in court. That's just going to polarize sides, and the potential for violence, that type of thing, is going to be far greater.
That wasn't a threat. Jim Genia, deputy solicitor for the Mille Lacs Band of the Chippewa, was merely stating what he and Ron Nargang of the Department of Natural Resources believed to be a fact. And Senators Gene Merriam and Steve Morris were looking at a tentative settlement that will become one of the big issues of their next session.
The sticky one in this whole thing is going to be as I'm sure you know, where the issue of spearing and netting of any sort on Mille Lacs Lake.
Shortly after this discussion ended, another began. Natural Resources Commissioner Rod Sandow explained the tentative agreement to representatives of 5 fish and wildlife groups.
Emphasize once again, no commercial harvest in this tribal fishing zone by band members or non-band members.
That was important. And they were intrigued when Commissioner Sandow said there'd be a $10 million payment to the Mille Lacs Band.
50% of the money will be invested in a permanent trust fund, and the proceeds of that fund will be used to manage resources.
Representatives said they like the basic agreement, say it seems fair, though many details remain to be ironed out. And later at a news conference, Mille Lacs Band Natural Resources Commissioner Don Wadle agreed.
We have a very good agreement between the Mille Lacs Band and the state of Minnesota to resolve an extremely difficult issue.
Both Natural Resources Commissioners said that their respective governments must approve before the agreement can take effect. But both agreed, too, their proposed settlement could help keep the peace on Lake Mille Lacs. Ken Speak, KARE 11 News, St. Paul.
They tested the water in one sense of the phrase. Late last night, area lakes were calm. But the implications of this overnight meeting are far more turbulent. The Sandy Lake Band of Chippewa says they cannot let the Mille Lacs Band negotiate away the fishing rights they received in that 1837 treaty.
It's like losing something of such great value, that we've been protecting and being guardians of. And somehow this guardianship is getting wrested away from us.
Before a roaring fire and among white supporters and other Indians, Sandy Lake Band elders plotted their plan to disrupt the Mille Lacs negotiations.
And they're fighting like hell to hold on to that prospect of a negotiated settlement. They don't want this to go to court. And I want to see it go to court.
To get the case in court, the Sandy Lake Band hopes to be arrested for spearfishing.
I will tell you, we are going over near Mille Lacs tonight. So we're going to do that. And we do expect there'll be some arrests.
By today's meeting, it was clear they've drummed up considerable support from a lot of different people. Less clear is exactly how many of them will choose to break the law and to spearfish.
It all went according to plan. Around 11:30 last night, 3 tribal elders from various Chippewa bands launched their boats into the waters of Mille Lacs Lakes to spearfish. This in protest of the hunting and fishing rights settlement between the Mille Lacs Band and the state. But law enforcement officials were standing by in boats themselves. It's illegal to spear before the end of the month, and 9 people were given tickets for intent to spearfish. Arrests were expected. Mike Chosa is from the Lac du Flambeau Band in Wisconsin. He was arrested for possessing a spear. He posted bail in the squad car and was released.
Those of us that are true believers in our rights, our traditional rights that go beyond the treaties even, we welcome all Indians to come over and harvest because that's their right also.
As they packed up their boats, many say they felt a sense of accomplishment. They say the Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa has no right to negotiate away rights secured in an 1837 treaty that also applied to them.
We're saying these are our treaties, they have to be honored.
They say the stage is now set for a federal court battle. But the DNR says this band of Chippewa may run into problems.
Hunting and fishing rights belong to bands, not to the individuals. So without the band sanctions, they have been found to not be able to take it into federal court.
Nevertheless, this group says from here on out, their voice will be heard. Sylvia Thomas, KARE 11 News.
It came down now. 200, okay?
It's time that our people, all of our people, move to ascertain our rights in the U.S. courts. Our children are going to need those rights for their children.
We've had the votes twice now, and I think it's important for the members of the House to live with it. And I think it's important for them to hear for the consequences.
Representative Dave Bishop fought hard to sway votes, but when those votes were counted, there were no more in favor than when the agreement went down to defeat on Monday. Hours of last-ditch lobbying from everyone with an interest in the dispute had changed nothing. The outcome was exactly what sports groups and landowners have said they wanted all along.
Agreement. We can take whatever the court hands out. We will settle with that.
The Mille Lacs Band has said all along that it's ready for a court fight. The band's negotiators tried to avoid it, and they blame racial attitudes in part for the failure of those efforts.
People in the non-Indian community have been attempting to impose their beliefs on the Indian people, and the Indian people just aren't willing to allow that to happen.
Governor Carlson was also part of the final push for passage. He's argued that a court ruling is not the best solution, but now says the state will make the best of it.
But we have been advised by those in a position to know that we would be smart to consider a settlement. And we have been urged to settle, and I think we're making a mistake.
On a cold, quiet winter's morning, sunrise comes to Mille Lacs. But this golden stillness isn't the peace it appears. Listen closely. In every bar, resort, and fish house, you'll hear a chorus of debate over a proposed Indian treaty rights settlement.
Let them abide by our laws. They're no better than we are.
Opponents of the deal talk about boycotting tribal casinos. Some even vow to keep the fish they now toss back.
I won't catch and release because if I release it, it's going to get caught in a net, and why? I might as well enjoy it while I can.
Still others say theirs is the voice of reason, not resentment.
And if this is the best we can get settling this treaty, then we darn well better take it.
What the tribe and the DNR want the public to take is a negotiated agreement, one that settles once and for all hunting and fishing rights promised to the Mille Lacs Chippewa in 19th century treaties.
Probably the largest misconception is that people think they can win this thing. They think that there's some unique thing out there that's going to make this case beatable.
The agreement gives the tribe $10 million spread over 5 years, 7,500 acres of state land, and a 6,000-acre tribal fishing zone offshore of the reservation. There, band members could gill net or spear, though not commercially. The zone, now covered by ice houses, would be off limits to non-Indian anglers, the very customers who come into John Odell's Rocky Reef Resort.
With this agreement, I would be done because you're zoning in on me. You're taking and putting it in my backyard. You know, why are they going to want to fish a netted area, would you? Would you want to fish a place that you knew was netted every year? No. No way.
The DNR pledges to buy out the few resorts who may be hurt. It says many more would suffer if the state lost in federal court. That's what happened in Wisconsin.
If we lost, my worst-case scenario would be that we would potentially lose ownership or rights to half the fish of Mille Lacs Lake.
Resorter Bill Thurmer says if that happens, anglers would be allowed fewer walleye, business would fall, and the magic of Mille Lacs would suffer. He calls the tribe's allowable harvest a drop in the bucket.
I think the 24,000 pounds would probably not be as much as we take, the white men take, in one day on opening weekend.
Half of the settlement money must be spent on environmental monitoring and enforcement. The tribe's biologists will keep tabs on fish populations in the special zone. It is possible they could reopen it to non-Indian angling.
Part of the agreement is that they have to have a viable law enforcement program.
Despite the assurance this settlement is best for both sides, opposition still runs strong. The parties are trying to diffuse potential trouble by holding information forums across the state.
We will hold more of those if necessary.
And soon, debate will shift from the ice houses on the lake to committee rooms in the legislature.
They have to look at the issues and decide, is this the reasonable approach to resolve this issue? And I think they're going to find the answer to that is yes.
And on a lake now caught in the grips of winter, it's the political wind that's beginning to blow. For Dimension, I'm Bill Hudson.
The protest was organized by the Hunting and Angling Club, sportsmen and women who are against the agreement. They were there to make sure the Mille Lacs Treaty issue wasn't going to be forgotten in 1993.
This represents over 300,000 sportsmen and women in this state, all fighting for the same thing, fairness. We just want to be fair about this whole thing.
Former Minnesota Vikings coach Bud Grant doesn't think it's fair when one group is allowed to fish with a pole and the other may be allowed to fish with a net. Grant says it's not fair to the fish and it's not fair to the anglers.
If anybody here would put a net in a lake or spear, you'd end up in jail. We don't want any special interest group to have a right that we don't have.
The issue, which is very emotional at times, had Grant surrounded by security officials. Someone had threatened to kill him.
Yesterday, I received a letter in the mail that said words to the effect that if I attended the rally here at the Capitol, it may be the last rally I'd ever attend.
There was no violence despite the fact that some Native Americans formed their own rally on the Capitol steps. Vernon Belcourt says the issue is all about treaty rights.
These people here are disgracing the words of their own ancestors by the way they're acting here. They're really trying to abrogate the 1837 treaty.
The battle has been going on for years. Many people hope it will end during this legislative session. In St. Paul, Denise Saunders, WCCO Television News.
It's one of the arguments opponents to the settlement often cite. If the Mille Lacs deal goes through, other Chippewa bands will seek the same. Now, a Hawley, Minnesota attorney has filed a motion to intervene on behalf of two Chippewa, who claim they, too, are parties to the original treaty.
Someone in our past, our ancestors, protected those rights for us to use today. Now it's our responsibility to go and look 7 generations into the future so that other people, the unborn that are coming, would also have the same chance at using those resources.
Hanks is a White Earth Band member. The other plaintiff, Clifford Skinaway, claims to be chief of Big Sandy, a band that is not recognized by the federal government. A similar motion to intervene by a Michigan Chippewa was denied last fall.
Courts have ruled that treaty rights belong to the band and not to individuals within the band. So this intervention is on behalf of individuals and not on behalf of the band. So we think that this should be dismissed for that reason.
Meantime, the bill which aims to settle the Mille Lacs suit remains stalled here in the Senate. So today, House Speaker Dee Long urged Governor Carlson to address a joint legislative session and argue the merits of its ratification. The governor is said to be considering her request. Bill Hudson, WCCO Television News, the state capitol. Little known for cracking smiles, Bud Grant had reason to today. A leader of efforts to defeat the settlement and send it to court, he sees the lack of a Senate committee vote as a moral victory and a shift in momentum.
As people became more informed, and as this went on the last 2 or 3 weeks, as the information was dispensed, more and more people said, hey, what's going on? How can the state give our resources away?
Lobbying against the measure has been intense, but insiders believe it has the votes to pass and was pulled only because it needs greater bipartisan balance.
I'm sure this issue is not dead, but I feel that we had a major victory.
In the KUOM studio today, players in the controversy took to the airwaves to explain the snag and give it the right spin.
A lot of politicking going on, and that was inevitable with a controversial bill like this. And I think that Senator Morris was real straight up about expressing his concern about needing good bipartisan support for the bill, and he didn't feel it was there last night.
Despite the Senate committee's surprise, the issue is still far from dead here in the legislature. Those who would like to see the matter go to court will still have to wait. Tomorrow, a House committee takes a crack at it, where it is scheduled for 2 hours of debate, but no vote. Bill Hudson, WCCO Television News, St. Paul.
When white anglers confronted Indian spearfishers in Wisconsin, it was a breakdown in negotiations and, for a while, a breakdown in public order. It's what negotiators in Minnesota have been trying to avoid. But now at Lake Mille Lacs, a group of Indians calling themselves the Anishinaabe Liberation Front say they will spearfish in Minnesota to protest treaty negotiations.
We are saying enough. You cannot do this. You cannot go through with this. We are going to exercise that right to hunt, fish, and gather in the ceded territories.
When they go out on Mille Lacs to spearfish, they expect to be arrested, and the state says it will oblige them.
It's our obligation, and we intend to enforce those regulations. So we will enforce regulations when we know of violations. These individuals would seem to be precipitating an emotional reaction and polarization that you did see in Wisconsin. But I would hope that Minnesotans wouldn't respond that way.
And one sports group says it won't confront the Indians on the lake. They say that's what the Indians want.
Is that they try to turn it into a race issue, get a bunch of shouting and screaming at the landings, like over in Wisconsin, and that plays into their hands. We go to the Capitol steps, and that's where we will go.
Not to the landings.
No, absolutely not.
The sports group is convinced it can win equal fishing rights with Indians if the state will just keep fighting in court. The group that's planning to spearfish says it won't work.
You have to take a look at Wisconsin, what happened in the fish wars there. They lost because those treaties are inviolate.
The spearfishers plan training this weekend in how to avoid violence if there are protests. The DNR says protesters on both sides should stick to the courts instead of the lake to avoid the rage Wisconsin suffered. Alan Cox, WCCO Television News.
WCCO Television with Don Shelby and Cindy Hilger. This is the 6 o'clock news on Channel 4.
Spearfishing has divided Native Americans and anglers in Wisconsin for years. Tonight it threatens to shake the balance Minnesotans have long had over harvesting its lakes.
As evening falls near the Big Sandy Indian Reservation, Native Americans from across the state and Wisconsin are gathering in protest. They want to show the Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa cannot speak for all Native Americans when it comes to fishing rights. Esme Murphy joins us live from near the Big Sandy Indian Reservation. Do I understand this correctly? Is there a split in the Native American community over this issue?
Well, Cindy, that's exactly right. The group of Native Americans that plans to gather here and to spearfish on either Lake Mille Lacs or Big Sandy Lake is directly opposed to the Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa that have been negotiating with the state. As far as these Native Americans are concerned, the Mille Lacs Band has no authorization to actually negotiate with the state, and what this group plans to do is to organize and get together here tonight and tomorrow and then take a vote on whether or not they are going to spearfish on Lake Mille Lacs or Big Sandy Lake, which is on the lake that I'm standing at right now, about 40 miles northeast of Lake Mille Lacs, and spearfish. Right now, the big story here is that the large number of Native Americans organizers said would be here has not materialized. So far, only 5 Native Americans have gathered at the campsite, which is just a few miles away, not the 200 to 600 that the organizers said would be here. What the organizers are saying is that the rest of the group will be arriving here tomorrow, and that late tomorrow afternoon they will decide on where they will spearfish. But they are adamant. They say they are definitely going to be spearfishing. The DNR is definitely adamant too. They say that they will be arresting any law violators. Now, just a few minutes ago, I spoke with one of the organizers about the group's plan for this weekend. Are you definitely going to be spearfishing on either Big Sandy Lake or Lake Mille Lacs?
Definitely. Either one, it all depends on what we all agree upon.
Are you expecting that a large number of your followers will be arrested?
I expect some to be arrested.
Now, Cindy, what is going on here is that the DNR is getting ready to arrest any law violators. So if there is any law violation of the state hunting and fishing regulations, the DNR says it's ready, that they will be arresting people, and the Native Americans are saying, just wait, tomorrow their numbers will show up here. Back to you, Cindy.
All right, thanks very much, Esme Murphy. Don?
Now, as we mentioned, this weekend's spearfishing event was organized as a protest to the Mille Lacs Band's effort to sign a hunting and fishing treaty with the state of Minnesota. The state's new plan to resolve the treaty is now ready for a full House vote, and members of the House Environment and Natural Resources Finance Committee have given their okay to the new proposal. The plan announced earlier this week eliminates the exclusive fishing zone, but allows netting and spearing. The proposal gives the Mille Lacs Band 15,000 acres of state land and allows band members to harvest 36,000 pounds of game fish every year. The House is expected to vote on this new Mille Lacs proposal next week. The governor supports the plan.
Today, which restricts protests at clinics that provide abortions.
We're watching for a different kind of protest this weekend up on one of the northern lakes. A group of Native Americans who say they will spearfish this weekend, either on Mille Lacs or Big Sandy, to demonstrate what they say is their treaty-given right. Esme Murphy is at Mille Lacs right now. Esme, we should make clear, these are not the same people who signed off on that spearfishing agreement with the DNR, the treaty.
Well, that's right, Don. In fact, what this group is trying to do is to not only break the state laws of Minnesota by spearfishing, but also to embarrass that band of Chippewa, the Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa, who've been negotiating with the state. What this group intends to do is to spearfish. Their feeling about the Mille Lacs Band is that the Mille Lacs Band has no right to negotiate for them. Now, so far, we've only been able to count about 20 Native Americans who've gathered here who say they will be spearfishing this weekend. That is a far cry short of the 200 to 600 Native Americans organizers said would be here. But the organizers say that that number will be showing up, in fact, tomorrow. On the shores of Big Sandy Lake, these Native Americans are waiting and getting ready. They are adjusting their spears.
Is how we try and hit the fish. You generally go for the back of the head right in this area, or anywhere where the main fin is on the back.
They are sizing up remodeled hard hats with lights that will daze the spawning walleye. There are some people who would look at that hat, that big miner's hat with the big light on it, and say that's an unfair advantage.
Well, what's an unfair advantage? If I use a Vexilar depth locator that can tell me if I got rocks and muds down there?
And so these 90s warriors make camp. Late tonight, most likely tomorrow night, they say they will be spearing the shoreline of Mille Lacs or Big Sandy.
Oh, it's going to happen. Fish are going to die.
The locals here gather in the bars and restaurants that a month from now will be filled with fishermen. There is concern here about what the Indians will do.
If it expands from the spearfishing to the hunting to everything else in a tourist resort-related area, it could affect the businesses like it has in northern Wisconsin.
And the DNR, of course, does not want a repeat of the violent confrontations that occurred in Wisconsin. DNR officials say that anybody caught spearfishing will be arrested. They say they are prepared to call in backups from local law enforcement agencies. So, Don, basically the confrontation is being readied here. The Indians say they will spearfish. The DNR says it's ready.
What kind of numbers are we talking about up there?
Well, in terms of the actual Native Americans who are here, that's the big issue. This group claimed they'd have 200 to 600 people here tonight with a big ceremonial dance. They aren't anywhere close to that. There are only about 20 of them. They insist, partly because of the bad weather up here, it has been raining for the past 4 or 5 hours, that all of the people who are planning to come up will show up tomorrow. But we'll have to see. If they only have 20 people tomorrow, this will be considered a defeat for them.
Esme Murphy reporting from Mille Lacs. Thank you. By the way, that new version of the Mille Lacs agreement is still moving through the legislature. A House committee approved it today, following the lead of a Senate committee last night.
Emergency room and is in critical condition. For the last 2 days, we've been reporting live from northern Minnesota, as you know, telling you about a group of Indians calling themselves the Anishinaabe Liberation Front. Their goal, to spearfish on Lake Mille Lacs in protest of a deal the state is currently trying to work out with the Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa. Now, late last night, the group chose to spear at a spot near the town of Malmo, which is on the northeast shore of Lake Mille Lacs. Our crew captured the Native Americans during their protest and as they were cited by the DNR. Jonathan Elias has the story.
What's your name, man?
Why am I doing it? Because I feel that the treaty rights need to be honored, because I'm an indigenous person of this land.
For those that go to jail, nobody should rest.
3 Chippewa elders from Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota slowly paddled out on Lake Mille Lacs just before midnight. With only 1 spear in the canoe and flanked by 2 other Chippewa canoes, the goal wasn't to spearfish. It was to test the legal water surrounding a treaty signed more than 150 years ago. A treaty giving Chippewa the right to fish in this area without restrictions.
You're being cited for being in possession of a spear on the lake during this time of year.
Less than 5 minutes in the water, and their spears were confiscated, and all, including the elders, were given $135 citations for violating state law.
We're being cited for having a spear and also having a light.
357, 355.
And I guess it's the state's position that we can't do that.
And here's a copy of the receipt for the spear and the spotlight, okay?
I am angry. Why shouldn't I be angry? I've been here for many years, and the longer I live, the angrier I get, because I see it all the time. And when is it going to change?
Change could take years. Those demonstrating are hoping these citations serve only as a first step in a lengthy legal battle, a battle that will win them the right to fish with spears and without citations. Jonathan Elias, WCCO News.
Now, in all, 9 citations were handed out, and in case you're wondering, no fish were speared during the protest.
I will tell you, we are going over near Mille Lacs tonight. So we're going to do that. And we do expect there'll be some arrests. You know, so the witness people need to be there when they make these busts. We've got to have you there.
If they're going to stop us tonight, and they're going to stop us tomorrow, and they're going to stop us next week, but we got to make that point known. For those that go to jail, nobody should rest.
First, we're waiting for the rest of our party.
Okay.
So, but I think I'd like to let the people know what we're doing now.
Okay.
There's a lot of confusion here in the dark and all that.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So,
well, when you're ready, let us know what your plans in there.
All right, can we? What we have is 3 elders are going to be going in. 1 from Minnesota, 1 from Wisconsin, and 1 from Michigan. 3 elders will be going in, and they expect to be arrested tonight for that.
We'll handle this as we would any other spearing arrest. Normally, with a spearing situation, we'll issue a citation, perhaps confiscate the spear, and go on from there. There are circumstances where we might have to make arrests. We'll just have to see.
It is going to set it up for the court case.
And I want things to change for my children and my grandchildren.
For those that go to jail, nobody should rest until everybody's out of jail.
The point's been made. The issues have been done now. You won't see us out here tomorrow night. We don't plan on it. We know we got our stuff set now for a court battle.
There's no argument this is one of the premier fishing lakes around. The Chippewa, who share its name, say it's time they share the resource, free of state interference.
The issue is about, does the Mille Lacs Band have a share of those fish?
Today in federal court, the band's 4-year suit against the state finally went to trial. The band wants the court to reaffirm rights to hunt, fish, and gather on lands it ceded to the federal government under an 1837 treaty. The band's position is the rights were never conceded. The state will argue those rights were taken away by an 1850 presidential order and another treaty 5 years later.
There's nothing inconsistent here, that in fact the historical conduct supports the U.S. Supreme Court's interpretation that hunting and fishing rights are included when a treaty says all right, title, and interest. It includes those rights as well.
Today, Chief Federal Judge Diana Murphy heard testimony from the band's first witness. Anthropology professor Charles Cleland told the court he's found no evidence that the Chippewa knew they were relinquishing their treaty rights, an opinion that was challenged under later cross-examination.
They're never going to be satisfied, and I don't think there's anything the band could do except maybe move to Mars that would satisfy these individuals, and that's not going to happen.
Attorneys for the band, state, counties, and landowners carted reams of documents into court today. Each is prepared to interpret the intent of an 1837 Chippewa treaty.
The Indian people would not have given up those rights. That's how they lived. If they had given up the hunting, fishing, and gathering rights, they would have starved to death.
The band says it reserved broad hunting, fishing, and gathering rights on the lands it ceded to the government back in 1837, land that was then available for white settlement. But exercising those rights is not allowed under state game and fish laws, so the band is seeking relief in federal court to regain what was granted under the 37 treaty. Today in court, the state fired back, claiming that a presidential order and an 1855 treaty clearly extinguished, quote, all right, title, and interest to tribal lands.
Well, the state has pointed out all along that the U.S. Supreme Court has already told us what that language means. The Supreme Court in the Klamath case has said that all right, title, and interest is very broad and does include hunting and fishing rights.
Over the next 2 weeks, experts on Indian language and culture will be called to testify and to help Judge Murphy decide if claims to a vast resource granted 157 years ago is valid today. In Minneapolis, I'm Bill Hudson, 4 News Tonight.
The sudden setback surprised even the best boat counters. Angry supporters afterwards blamed redneck sportsmen and racists.
When we have white high school boys at Onemia in a uproar with baseball bats saying, "Come on, Indians, we'll play ball with your head." That's part of the background of this particular bill.
The tone of the long debate was also harsh, as opponents said the treaty gave Indians too much.
You don't seem to care enough about the regular folks in this state, those that hunt and fish and care about this community.
Watching from the gallery, Indian leaders accepted the outcome calmly.
We know what we have to do now, and we'll proceed with our court case.
Even so, it's not dead yet. What is it? Well, even the author doesn't know for sure.
You know, you got 3 ways to go there, hell, heaven, and purgatory. And I don't know where that thing is right now.
Governor Carlson supports the settlement, but convinced only 9 fellow Republicans to vote yes. If it has any chance of passing now, Democrats say the governor needs to stand and deliver. Pat Kessler, WCCO Television News.
It's the one solution opponents have long rallied for, a court test of the rights Indians claim treaties grant them. The Hunting and Angling Club alone spent more than $100,000 on lobbying and literature to defeat the settlement.
We were just a little voice in the wilderness saying we don't think this is right and that we'd like to make this an issue for public debate. And in the last 2 years, we've made it an issue for public debate.
The House has until tomorrow to reconsider the settlement bill. Meantime, on Mille Lacs Lake last night, dissident band members continue to show their anger with laws prohibiting spearing. Their attempts were met by arrests.
Barring a last-ditch effort to revive the settlement and win its passage in the legislature, the case moves to federal court in just over a year. A trial will determine if the band retains its right to hunt, fish, and gather off the reservation. A second phase would determine how much of the resource the band can claim.
The band's counsel says it will seek 100% of game and fish in the disputed territory.
What we've typically seen in these types of cases all across the country is that the judge comes down in the middle and says the bands get a 50% share of the resource and the state gets a 50% share of the resource.
And on a lake 90 miles to the north, another chapter quietly unfolds. Another season will likely pass before resolution arrives. Bill Hudson, WCCO Television News, Lake Mille Lacs.
Are you definitely going to be spearfishing on either Big Sandy Lake or Lake Mille Lacs?
Definitely. Either one, it all depends on what we all agree upon.
Are you expecting that a large number of your followers will be arrested?
I expect some to be arrested.
Yes. How you doing, Paula?